right, folks, thank you so much for joining us for News 19 on this primary night where the polls closed about an hour ago. In just a couple of minutes, JR is going to be live in Studio B with our insiders, but we want to start off this evening taking a look at some of the numbers. Again, polls closed about an hour ago. We'll start off at the Statehouse, seeing if the numbers are coming in yet. This is a very popular race. A lot of people in the northeast part of Richland County keeping their eye on the numbers with this race, with Richland District 2 school board member Monica Elkins, current representative Ivory Thigpen, and Richland County board chair Overture Walker all on this race. And so again, it's been over an hour since the polls closed, but we know Richland County is one of the biggest counties, and so voter turnout has been slow, but we haven't got those numbers in yet. Keeping our fingers crossed that those will be coming in soon. The same goes for this Senate District 26 seat with Dick Harpootlian and Russell Ott both contending for that race. Another race that a lot of folks, especially across Kershaw, Lee, Richland, and Sumter counties, are keeping their eyes on the Democratic side of things is the race for Senate District Seat 35 involving Austin Floyd, Jeffrey Graham, and Lucy Mahan. Some numbers coming in, Floyd doing well at this point with 625 votes, and then down to Jeffrey Graham, who has 751 votes at this point, leading Lucy Mahan as well with a little more than 209 votes. But you can see for yourself, 0% of the precincts are reporting. So the numbers coming in very slowly, JR, but coming in. With what we have right now, what are the insiders saying?
Well, we're going to find out right now. Dave Wilson, Antoine Seawright rejoining us to give their perspective on everything that's going on right now. Really no big numbers to talk about right now, but we are seeing something in the 1st District. Nancy Mace looks like she may avoid a runoff there, as she is winning big time right now. I know it's early, but still the challenge Catherine Templeton gave her and the other challenger in the race, right now it looks like it's Nancy Mace.
Look, I think the Trump endorsement mattered in this case. It's clearly that the Republican primary has baked themselves around Trumpism. That is the order of the day. And so his endorsement, I think, is going to matter in that race the same way it's going to matter in the upstate in the Timmons race.
Right.
Because South Carolina has proven to be, on the Republican side, Trump country.
And so in this particular race, keep in mind, you may have finished voting right now. The counting is still going on. So we're going to be talking about kind of how things look, but you're seeing only a little slice of it right now. The thing with the Nancy Mace race, and that was this, the ultimate inside Washington baseball here is the fact that the Nancy Mace Catherine Templeton race is a fight between the traditional Republicans in there and Kevin McCarthy, who was the former Speaker of the House, kind of in a retaliatory way going back against Nancy Mace, who voted him out as Speaker. And that is, or at least voted that up for for him to be voted out. And this is the place where there are a lot of infighting. Antoine's going to love this. There's a lot of infighting that's going on between factions in the Republican Party. And you're going to see a lot of those things in races that we'll talk about later tonight.
Look, people hate the Congress, but they love their congressperson.
Yes, they do.
And while a lot of people may be frustrated with Washington, D.C., in the 1st Congressional District, if the numbers hold out, it's clear that they appreciate or show some sort of trust in Nancy Mace. I think we're going to see that incumbency play itself out.
Which is really interesting, JR and Antoine, because keep in mind, Donald Trump endorsed Katie Arrington in the last race against Nancy Mace, and then he endorses Nancy Mace this time around. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays.
I was talking to a voter earlier today who, in the Joe Wilson in the 2nd District, she voted for Hamp Redmond, I believe is his name, and saying, well, I hope Redmond wins. And I'm like, well, obviously Wilson is popular, and if history holds true, he's probably going to win the Republican nomination again. So people, as you guys say, they like to complain, but at the end of the day, most of the same names make it back to the starting gate.
Well, voting is an exercise that allows voters to express themselves. And as I said earlier in this program, we settle our differences and our disputes at the ballot box. And conventional wisdom will tell you is that it's easier to be against something than it is to be for something. In some cases, when you see people vote against the incumbent, it means they're frustrated with the incumbent. But in most cases, people are saying my life is not so bad with this person in office.
Well, and that's where if you start taking a look at the race that is Penry Gustafson's race, that's going to be upper part up towards Lancaster into Kershaw County. Initial numbers that came back had her losing like 82 to 18 thus far. That is a walloping when you think about an incumbent senator down by almost 65, 70 points. That says a lot about what the community's thoughts are about her as their senator.
Well, it also says that the primary has become more and more extreme and not in line with, I think, the totality of the community. We're starting to see a tight race over in Lexington County with incumbent and dear friend Katrina Shealy, who's also facing a challenger, someone running to the right of her. And so we're starting to see that the extremists come out and vote in primaries, while on the other hand, you see most people waiting to the general election.
But the interesting part of that is this. We talked about this earlier. You're not expecting more than anywhere from 11 to 14, maybe 15% of voters. So think about this when you're sitting here watching this at home. Think about the neighbors that live around your house right now. That would be like you showing up at the polls and none of your neighbors showing up. And you're the one who's the one making the decision about who's going to be in that elected office. We saw that, ironically, in the gubernatorial race. When you broke the numbers down, 9% of people voted for Henry McMaster in that gubernatorial race. 9% of South Carolina voters decided who the Republican nominee was going to be, who eventually won that race.
Sadly, a small group of people tonight will ultimately decide what the future of South Carolina politics will look like.
You mentioned the Katrina Shealy race, and Dave, there's been a lot of noise coming out of Lexington County over the last month or so with a lot of races over there. How come?
There is a lot of change in the leadership in the Lexington County Republican Party. There was a huge infighting within the Lexington County GOP. I mean, you had two different factions that really started going at each other. And so you've got a group of folks right now that are really beginning to galvanize around somebody else because of some certain stances that Katrina Shealy took on certain bills, not the least of which was the heartbeat bill. And she stood with the Senate sisters and made a very strong stand from her standpoint. And there are billboards up in Lexington County, saying Katrina Shealy's not pro-life. Katrina Shealy basically lied to us to get the job. And there's a lot of that kind of, as we said before, infighting within the party that is trying to sway people to somebody else.
I've heard it more in some other races as well, like the race for sheriff. I've heard a lot of chatter about that. Also, some of the county council seats over there. A lot of people just have a lot to say about what's going on in Lexington County right now.
Well, Lexington is growing. I jokingly say when people start talking about border issues in our state, the border issues people face in Lexington is whether or not people in Richland can come over and make a living and be adjusted to the quality of life. But Lexington is growing. The politics and the faces of the county are changing. And what you're starting to see is the extremists who have hijacked the Republican Party in total are now starting to make a power shift happen at a very localized level, and we're seeing that play out in real time.
But it's also, and we've talked about this before, Antoine, you really on these races are dealing with some local issues. I mean, if you live in Lexington,
not always,
but if you live in Lexington County, let's just take this for example. If you live in Lexington County right now, you understand what it's like to drive down 378 from I-20 going into Lexington. If you don't plan for 45 minutes to an hour to get yourself down that road, you're going to be late. And that type of localized issues, what's going to be going on with taxes, what's going to be going on with growth. Just like we saw in York County several years ago, the growth issue is a big issue. Can the roads handle it? Can the infrastructure handle it? And that's part of what you're seeing, especially in like county council races, not necessarily state senate or the sheriff's race.
I disagree a little bit. I think the electric's changing. A lot of people have no loyalties or no deep ties to the current political makeup in any of these counties. And so you have new people coming in, And so they're just going with what they see. They have no history. They have no knowledge of the Shealy, Jinky Knox races
have
from
no
back in the
idea,
day.
no.
They have no depth or width to some of the things that's been going on in the county. So they're just here saying, let me express myself with no deep, dark history. And there's no deep tie to the person, but they have ties to politics.
Well, that's the other part about it, too. And we talked about this before. When you think about the fact that we had the census 4 years ago, the census is what drives our political boundaries, the district that you live in. In certain areas of Lexington County, you've got a new state senator, a new state representative, and other folks who are representing you on county council. And so you've got new names that are coming in there as well. And there are times when people who are politically opportunists recognize, wait a minute, this is a no name. And no offense to Senator Garrett, he's not as well known in Lexington County as he is in Greenwood, where he's based. But his district now runs from Abbeville to Greenwood to Saluda to Lexington along the lake.
I want to talk about a race getting a lot of attention here in Columbia. That is the Senate race involving Dick Harpootlian and Ott. Harpootlian district was basically what? Just
moved down to the coast.
right. And so now he is currently leading, I believe, some early results there, 75 to 25%. And this is with about
There may be about 300 votes total.
not too many votes cast. But are you guys expecting to see this to be the final outcome tonight?
Who knows? I think the race is going to be tight. This is a new seat. Remember, this Senate seat has not been vacated has not been vacant in 48 years. Nikki Setzler, the longest serving senator, I think, in the United States of America, no longer running for re-election. So these voters have not been conditioned to vote in a Democratic primary or Republican primary traditionally, but mainly a Democratic primary. So I think it's going to be a new race, a new seat, but I think it's going to be a tight race.
Well, and that's the place where redistricting comes into play here, because the district that used to be Nikki Setzler's district, the river between Lexington and Richland County was the border, and it went all, in more ways than one. It went all the way down to the southern part of Lexington County into Aiken County and part of Calhoun. And so that's a completely different type of voter population than when the line got moved from the river to Hardin Street. Now you're sitting there going, okay, that's a mile and a half. But now all of a sudden, that district is representing not only Casey, West Columbia, Springdale, parts of Swansea, Gaston, but now it represents also Elmwood, Earlwood, parts of Shannon, 5 Points, and that's a very different area. And so I think that was a great opportunity for Senator Setzler to say, you know what, it's been great. And Senator Harpootlian, recognizing that, is trying to pull an urban vote, while Russell Ott is trying to pull more of a rural vote. And so when you take a look at these numbers, it's which precincts are coming in right now.
Right.
And that will be a real telltale.
All right, Dave, Antoine, they're going to be with us throughout the evening on air and online. Darcy, as we continue to wait, these results come trickling in this evening here in this area.
All right, JR, Dave, Antoine, both to you both. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Of course, they're going to give us all of the back and forth on the politics behind it, but the hard numbers are starting to come in, and longtime Senate Representative Kevin Johnson has secured the vote, according to the Associated Press. He, with 80% of the vote at this hour, a little bit more than almost 80%, and almost 40% of the precincts reporting, calling the race for Kevin Johnson. Of course, we're going to continue to follow all of our local races across all 11 counties in the Midlands that WLTX covers in the Midlands, not only on air but also online. Stay with us. We'll see you again in about an hour.
All right, the polls have been closed for a couple of hours now. We do know that Joe Wilson is declared the Republican winner in District 2. We do know that, but a lot of other races, Darcy, still up for grabs right now. We've got some races, some pretty good ideas about where things stand, but you've got a closer look at some of those numbers.
I do, JR. Let's start with this number. There are more than 3 million people who are registered to vote in South Carolina. About 220,000 showed up to vote. So that means close to 7% of everyone who is registered to vote came out, either voted today or sent in a mail-in ballot or voted early. So what I'm saying to you today is 7% of the people made a decision today for 100% of the people. JR talked about the 2nd Congressional District with Joe Wilson. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But 1st Congressional District, Nancy Mace versus former DHEC lead Catherine Templeton. The Associated Press called this race for Mace about an hour ago. Polls closed at 7 o'clock. Mace having the backing of former President Donald Trump. Now let's talk more about that 2nd Congressional District, where this was a pretty easy defeat of Mr. Redmond by Mr. Wilson, longtime representative for much of Lexington County and everything that encompasses the 2nd Congressional District. So he will go on to serve another term with 75.8% of the vote. A closer look at some of these local races, because we know how important those races are as well. Not a lot of numbers coming in, but we're keeping a close eye on the Lexington County Sheriff's race. At this point, if our numbers, when they do update, I think at this point, things are looking very good for the incumbent, Jay Kuhn. So let's go to the Statehouse. Longtime politician Tamika Isaac Devine walks away with 91% of the vote in the Senate District 19 race, easily defeating Dr. Michael Addison in that race. So again, 2,600 votes for Devine, 235 for Addison. We're going to take a look at a couple other races in just a couple of minutes. But JR, I'm going to send it back to you in Studio B so we can hear from our political experts about what these numbers mean and what this means at the Statehouse.
All right, Darcy, thank you so much. Let's expand on something Darcy said about 7% of the people making a decision today for 100% of the state. What is she talking about there? So
when you think about it from a primary standpoint, if you have 13-14% of voters in South Carolina, there's about 3.3 or so million voters registered in South Carolina. If 14% of those people show up, half vote Republican, half vote Democrat, let's just say that, then 7% of the voters in South Carolina are making a decision about who that candidate is going to be. We saw that happen back in 2022 in the Henry McMaster race. There was about an 18% voter turnout. Henry McMaster won with 9% of the voters in South Carolina. That's 1 out of 11 voters voting for Henry McMaster. He becomes the nominee. He eventually becomes governor of South Carolina. But it all started with that small percentage right there.
I guess you would say it really is important to get out and cast the ballot, and don't complain if you don't, right?
Well, listen, tonight is proof that the primaries perhaps matter just as much, if not more, than a general election in some cases.
So let's talk about that then for a moment. If you look at it right now, of the races that are going on right now, the House and Senate races, 40% of the South Carolina Senate's going to be decided tonight, or if there's a runoff, by the end of this primary season, 4 out of 10 senators are going to be sat. More than half of the House is going to be sat. And the rest of the races are very much either going to be leaning Republican or leaning Democrat. There are maybe 2 or 3 races in the entire Statehouse that are going to be competitive once we get to the election.
And another factor you see playing out tonight is the trickle down from the national election playing into the local elections. You see more turnout. You see more challenges on the Republican side because there was an open Republican primary with Trump and others in the race. And on the Democratic side, we had a competitive primary, but it theoretically was not competitive. So you do not see the challenges to many other seats down the Democratic ballot in the same way. And so what you also see as a result of that is a lot of Trump versus non-Trump voters are what is being debated at the ballot box tonight. And sadly, you're starting to see incumbents who may have taken a position 1 or 2 steps away from what was now mainstream Republicans, and it's costing them in their elections.
How do you get more people, though, to get involved and just go vote on primary day? How do you do that?
I think we have to make them competitive. I think we have to learn how to hold folks accountable. And just because you like a person does not mean that they're doing everything you want them to do. And so it's going to take some more direct engagement other than every 2 to 4 years. It's going to take showing up at meetings, showing up at the Statehouse, the courthouse, the town council meetings, to engage for people to understand how important these races are. And then I think government plays this role. I think it's important for the South Carolina Election Commission to have some sort of engagement with the public, saying these are when elections are going to be held. There should have been mail, there should have been radio, should have been TV, PSAs about saying today is election day.
And it's really, I mean, then again, there are thousands of signs all across the counties as you drive around here in the Midlands that says vote June 11th. The other part about it, though, is, and to Antoine's point, are these competitive races. I mean, you've got some competitive races that are going on right now. Let's just take Lexington County, for example. You've got Zoe Warren, who is considered to be more of a MAGA Republican up against the incumbent Katrina Shealy. Now, if you've got a competitive race, you're going to get more people to show up because they're working really hard to get those numbers. So you've got a case with these numbers right here. But the other part about it here, and Carlisle Kennedy coming in the position that he's in right now. You drive through Lexington County, you can't help but see a Carlisle Kennedy sign.
Right.
And so there's so much of that name ID and name recognition. But this race right here, you're almost guaranteed we're going to be talking about this 2 nights from now.
I was about to say, this almost essentially guarantees a runoff. The same for Senate District 35, the old Thomas McElveen seat, which Sumter, Kershaw, Richland. I think we're going to see the runoff. I think the seat in Orangeburg, the House seat, Jerry Govain and likely Mr. Felder will be in a runoff. There will be a number of races that will feel the strain of a runoff. Same thing for Senate District 22 in Columbia, the old Mia McLeod Senate seat. That is likely looking to be a runoff scenario. So once again, voters are going to be asked for the third time, in some cases, to come back out, the presidential preference primary, the traditional primary, and now a potential runoff. So look for voter fatigue and look for that 7% number to dwindle down to 2 to 3%.
So let's just, so that you're at home and so you kind of understand how these numbers work. In a primary election, you have to win 50% of the vote
50 +1.
plus one, which means that you have to have a full majority. So it's not what's called a plurality, which means I got the most votes out of everybody. You've got to win at least 50% plus one. So if you go back to look at some of these races we had on the screen a moment ago, you're going to see people there at 46% or 48%. If they haven't crossed that 50% line yet, they haven't won, and those races are most likely going to be going to a runoff. This is a prime example. You got Jeffrey Graham right here with 47%. Unless something happens in this District 35 race and Graham can push through and get that extra 3% plus one more, then this is going to be a runoff election.
But look at those numbers.
Yeah.
This is an open Senate seat in South Carolina with essentially less than 5,000 people participating.
Right.
That ought to tell you a Senate seat, what, 200,000+ people?
155,000, I think.
Okay,
is what that was.
155,000 people, 150,000 plus people,
Right.
and 5,000 people in a primary show up.
And so you look at these numbers right here, where Austin Floyd is right now with just under 1,500, and then you've got Jeffrey Graham at just over 1,800. I don't have my glasses on, but I think we're close to that. Those are not very far apart when you think about number of votes. I mean, this is the question where what's called the get out the vote effort. You may see it the phrase GOTV. As much as that's not go TV, it is get out the vote. And that is an important thing that most candidates are working really hard to do, because if you lose just by one vote in every single precinct, you're Richard Nixon running against John Kennedy back in 1960.
And here's what I would tell my friends who are watching at home. Early voting for the primary starts as soon as the elections are certified.
Right.
Because you have a 2-week window.
Right.
And you can vote in the runoff even if you did not vote in.
Now, the question is, can you vote in a
different primary?
Can you
don't know the
switch?
answer to
We
that.
don't have the answer. We'll work on that one. But the thing that you want to understand is, you're sitting here and you're watching right now, and thanks for watching, and we want to help you understand what's going on tonight. It's really important to understand that your vote actually counts. We talk about this every single week. And when it goes back to your first question, JR, Why in the world can 7% of people make a decision for 100% of the population? Because decisions are made by those who show up.
All right, so we talk about this, it seems like every other year. During a primary year, voter turnout is low, but in presidential years like this year, we expect those numbers to be greatly higher come November, no doubt.
In some cases, but in some cases may not be. We've seen presidential years where the numbers are not reflective of what the expectations are. And certainly in an environment where there's little to no appetite, in some cases for either candidate, I think we're going to test drive what this election cycle will ultimately be defined as in real time.
And you've got to think about it. We were talking about this just a little while ago. You think about the fact that, let's talk about the elections that we've been having in the last year. You've got runoff special elections. You've had the gubernatorial election in 22. You had the presidential preference primary. You've got this primary. We're going to have runoffs in 2 weeks. We've got a general election in November. And to Antoine's point, you can have voting fatigue sometimes because it's like, is there ever a time when we're not talking about somebody running for office?
Right. Well, we hope to have some more definitive answers when we join you again around 10 o'clock or so, Darcy. I know you're still going through some numbers in the studio tonight, trying to get a count on who's doing what. We'll send it back to you.
All right, JR, thank you so much. And thank you to our insiders again. Let's take a look at some of these local races. Orangeburg County, the coroner's race has been a big one. First time in more than 3 decades that Orangeburg County is going to have a new coroner, as the current coroner, Samuetta Marshall, is not running for re-election. And as you can see for yourself, this is one of those races that Dave and Antoine were just talking about. 50 plus 1%. So at this point, with 1 out of 3 precincts reporting, Sean Fogel has 45% of the vote, Valencia Golden at 21%, Montez Haynes at 34%. So this could very well be one of those races that the gentlemen were just talking about that goes to a runoff. So in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about this race quite possibly again in just about 2 weeks. Let's take another look at our Lexington County Sheriff's race. We were saying those numbers were populating for us. And again, 30% of the precincts in Lexington County reporting. The current sheriff, the incumbent, Jay Kuhn, right now with about 67% of the vote, 7,000, more than 7,300 votes. His next closest challenger would be Billy Warren with 28, almost 2,900 votes. And then Alan Driggers with 682. And then this is the primary for the Democrats on the Fairfield County Sheriff's race. And as you can see, Will Montgomery, 56% of the vote right now with 86% of the precincts reporting. So we are expecting the Associated Press to probably call this race in the next couple of minutes. But there's still 14% of the precincts out, and so there's still numbers yet to be counted, and we're waiting for the Fairfield County Clerk of Court race to populate on our website. Longtime Orangeburg County Sheriff Leroy Ravenel doing well at this point, 30% of the precincts in Orangeburg County reporting at this hour, 81% of the vote for him. Of course, we're going to continue to follow these numbers for you, not only on air, but also online at WLTX.com, and we'll have an update for you again in about an hour.
Video. There we go. You guys ready?
All
All right. This is Insiders for Thursday night. Let me get a clock going here. I'm not sure. We'll probably do about 5 minutes here. Let me just get a clock going. All right, there we go. Okay, guys, let's go in 25 seconds. That way I'll have a...
I won't be
Good
handling my
idea.
phone.
What's that?
Like, I have my phone in my hand.
Yeah.
Like Darcy tossed.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, thanks, Darcy.
All right. In 10 seconds. In 5, 4. It is time now to bring in our Statehouse insiders. Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist. Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist. Looking back a couple of days now to the primary in South Carolina. Once again, voter turnout an issue for some out there.
Look, I think when it's all said and done, we know that it will be less than 15% turnout. I think when it's all said and done, we know that less than 15% of the people are going to decide what the future of South Carolina politics look like at the local level. I think that's depressing. It's frustrating, particularly for those of us who live and breathe this stuff. But at the end of the day, voters decide who and what they want their politicians to be and what they want them to work on. The primary is the first step in that process.
And so by the end, we get to the end of the entire primary process, there will be some runoff races. And those races are going to be happening in about a week and a half from now. And so those races, when that is all said and done, half of the state legislature is already going to be basically sat for this coming session, which means that the rest of the races are going to be the ones that are going to be handled in the general election. And most of those are pretty much either solid Republican
It is primary night in South Carolina, 10 o'clock. Thank you all so much for joining us for this special edition of News 19. I'm Darcy Strickland. J.R. Berry standing by with the insiders in Studio B. We'll check in with him in just a couple of minutes. But polls closed at 7 o'clock, so that means we've got 3 hours behind us since poll managers shut and locked the doors and the numbers started to tally. We know there are more than 3 million registered voters in South Carolina, and what we know with the early numbers is that it looks like only about 11% of those who were registered to vote showed up to participate in the primary, whether they did it in early voting, mail-in ballots, or showed up at the polls today. So let's take a look at some of the key races, starting with our local races, because those are very important. Over in Lexington County, the incumbent Jay Kuhn, with more than 39% of the vote in right now, close to 40% of the vote, is doing well with 65% of the vote. We're going to head over to Fairfield County, where the incumbent Will Montgomery will be sheriff in that area again, beating out his other 2 opponents. The Associated Press calling that race about an hour ago. And Fairfield County Clerk of Court Dorothy Belton just talked with her camp just a couple of minutes ago. Associated Press calling her the winner in this race. According to Ms. Belton, that makes her the first African-American clerk of court in Fairfield County. And to look a little further south from Fairfield down to Orangeburg County, Sheriff Leroy Ravenel, the longtime sheriff and incumbent in Orangeburg County, has won that race with 78% of the vote, defeating Bubba Johnson tonight. As I mentioned, 3.3 million people are registered to vote in South Carolina. It looks like about 300,000 showed up across the state to vote. We were in Orangeburg, had a chance to speak with a poll manager about the importance of voting. Let's listen.
Turnout as I would like. It was very poor, actually. We only had like 72 voters, and this is suburban too. We actually have a lot of voters registered in this area, so to me it was a very light turnout.
All right, light turnout. And as we stay in Orangeburg County, a look at another race. This will be the first time in about 30 years that the coroner's office has someone in the seat other than current coroner Samuetta Marshall, who is not running for re-election. And it looks like as numbers continue to come in, Sean Fogle is doing well at this hour with 45% of the vote. But again, we're still waiting for more numbers to come in. You need 50 plus 1% of the vote to not move into a runoff, which would happen in about 2 weeks. So these numbers are coming in for us here online. Of course, we're going to update you not only online, but also on air. In the meantime, JR standing by with our political experts, the insiders, with a closer look at what these numbers mean, not only on the local level, but when you head to the Statehouse and what it means on the national level as well. JR?
All right, Darcy, thank you. All 3 of us on our devices trying to
them around.
Trying to get some information here. And it was interesting right before you threw it to us. You guys said Russell Ott is declaring victory now.
I saw a report on Twitter that a colleague of the state newspaper reporter saying, who was at the victory party saying that the Ott camp was claiming victory. Now, all the precincts have not been counted. The race has not been called, so we'll see. We've seen that move before, and it doesn't play out that way. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those like Humphrey moments. But here's the thing about it: if you're looking at this right now, this is a separation of votes as it counts right now. And it's not the final count, but 210 votes. When we go back to talking about decisions are made by those who show up, this is an example of that, because most Senate races in South Carolina are decided by less than 5,000 votes. You look at it right here. I mean, Russell Ott, if you take a look at those numbers right now, that's a 210 vote difference right now. That's pretty significant for Dick Harpootlian, who, keep in mind, has been a state senator, solicitor in the area, the whole Murdaugh trial on top of that, and plenty of money to spare to be able to run. But Russell Ott's district is drawn more rural than it is city.
And we just got some updated numbers there. The vote gap narrowed there slightly, 2012 to 1838, so less than 200 votes now separating the two.
The interesting part, though, he only has to win by 1.
Right.
1.
So a question. I mean, you mentioned the Murdaugh trial.
Yeah.
Could representing convicted double murderer Alec Murdaugh affected anybody's decision in this race?
Hard to say without
Yeah.
exit
Yeah.
polls.
Yeah.
Right.
It's-
I don't know if voters even put the two and two together because Harpootlian, being the lawyer he is, a prosecutor he was, former solicitor, he's taken on tough trials before.
Right.
So I'm not sure that was a voting factor. I think it all calls down. I think this is the kind of year where voters are throw the bums out type year. I mean, look, you have the Senate seat in Lancaster. Looks like Sandy Senn, the senator down in Charleston. Now Katrina Shealy, a dear friend, is in a tight runoff race over in Lexington County. This is a kind of, in some cases, an anti-incumbent year.
See, we can get the Katrina Shealy numbers up because this race looks like it could be headed to
To
a
a runoff.
runoff right there.
So this is a place where Carlisle Kennedy over the last couple of weeks in Lexington has blanketed the entire area with signage. I mean, you can't drive anywhere in Lexington without seeing it.
You're seeing him with Trump.
Right.
Because all of his signs have a picture of him with the former
Right.
president.
And so in this particular case, keep in mind, if you want to win in a primary, you have to win 50% of the vote plus one. And right now, nobody's got that. Katrina Shealy and Carlisle Kennedy most likely going to be in a really tight race. Now, here's the thing about this. Historically, second place has an upper hand in a runoff because everybody else who didn't win kind of has it out for the person who did. Let's just take, for example, Nikki Haley and her race against Gresham Barrett. She came in second place and in the runoff had the support of a lot of the other candidates and ended up becoming governor of South Carolina several years ago. So you look at this and you begin to realize that we're now stepping into, once we leave tonight, as we talked about a little bit earlier, we're now stepping into early voting for the runoff because you got 2 weeks ahead of the election that's going to be coming up, and the runoff's in 2 weeks.
The key to a runoff victory is getting your voters back out.
Right.
And so you don't get cute trying to expand the electorate. You start with a baseline effort of getting your core supporters back out because we know it's going to be a very shrunk electorate, a small group of people deciding, so you have to lean in with your base.
But to go back to your comment from a moment ago, JR, if you take a look right now at Trump-backed congressional races, every Trump-backed congressional race in South Carolina, that person is currently in the lead. Nancy Mace, William Timmons, Mark Burns in the 3rd Congressional District. Now, most likely the race with Mark Burns in the 3rd Congressional District, which is that kind of purple area right there, Mark Burns right now has got 32.4%. Sherry Biggs at almost 30. And then you've got Stuart Jones, a former Statehouse representative. He's just wrapped up. And you've got Kevin Bishop, who has been known for years for his work with Lindsey Graham. And you've got a couple other folks who are part of that. But in that particular race, you've got Burns, who was backed by Trump. You got Nancy Mace backed by Trump in the 1st. And you've got the same thing happening right now with Timmons.
And then on the other side to that, if you transition more local, you got 3 Republican senators who took a vote contrary to the extreme wing of their party, and now 3 of them, or 2 of them, are likely going to lose. 1 goes to a runoff. So it shows you how the tectonic plates in the Republican Party have shifted to be even more right and even more extreme.
But that's the primary process, though.
Sure.
Primary process it always tends to be.
Not always.
Well, not always, but quite often you've got one extreme. You're appealing to this group of people over here. The Democrats are appealing to this group of people over here. And then somewhere along the way, you start talking to the folks that are in the middle somewhere. Because you've got to be able to win the ideological Republicans or the ideological Democrats in the race itself to be able to be that nominee.
But I think the difference is, Dave, we've seen a contested primary between the more left of our party and the more moderate. Joe Biden has proven, and the elections after elections have proven that we are still a center-left party. Whereas on the right, you've seen the party get more and more extreme and tilt even further right away from what we describe as a traditional Republican. That's played out in the presidential cycle. It's played out from a policy standpoint, and now it's playing out at the local level in legislative races and even down ballot to school board and county council races.
And you see that with a group called the Freedom Caucus. We've talked about them on Insiders before. It's a group of Republican legislators who are further right. There are a little bit more than a dozen and a half on there. Yeah, and so a lot of them do appeal to the far end of their party and the far end of the conservative or Republican side. And they are, in the same way, trying to turn around and make changes against leadership in the South Carolina House. So all of this has been kind of running in the background, but sister senators, you've got Sandy Senn, you've got Penry Gustafson, you got Katrina Shealy. The three Republicans of the sister senators, every single one of them is in either a losing position right now or not doing well at all. This is absolutely a decimating statement for Penry Gustafson, a one-term senator out of Kershaw, Lancaster County areas.
You think it has to do with the abortion issue?
It has to do
that's
with
part of it.
That's part of it. There are other issues that are going on with her in the Senate too.
But I also think it's important for folks to note at home that all of these races have been decided, in some cases, less than 5,000 votes. In this case, less than 8,000 votes.
Right.
A small segment of the population is going to give someone the keys to their political home for 2 to 4 years. I think that's even more of a sad case of where we are in this moment more than anything else.
58% of the precincts reporting in this case, in this race, I should say.
Right.
You don't see either of these two top candidates getting 50 plus 1%.
At this point in time, no. You got to keep in mind we're going on it's 10-10 right now, and so the majority of those numbers, as you saw them on the screen just now, those kind of hold in place unless there's some sort of major move.
Well, I just got a text that some news outlets are now calling it for Russell Ott.
And if that's the case, now you've got Russell Ott, who is now taking a win over Dick Harpootlian. Keep in mind, that district used to be Nikki Setzler's district. It moved across into Richland County. It's got a portion of Richland County now. But keep in mind, what's in that portion of Richland County? The university, downtown businesses, 5 points, and then Elmwood, Irwell, and a little bit of Shandon.
If my calculations are correct, they're separated by what? 100 and...
About 180.
180 votes or
Plus or minus
something?
150, 180.
All right.
You're asking me to do quick math at 10:15, JR. I can only do so much at the moment.
Well, it just seems like the number's getting a little smaller as more precincts are reported.
But the interesting part is the percentage difference is still staying about the same. I mean,
Right.
it's a 4% split right there. And that's the place where Russell Ott really focused on his district. And that district has a lot of rural area in Lexington County going all the way down into Calhoun County, has a part of Richland County as well. And Russell Ott won considerably well
Right.
in Calhoun County.
How big of the backing from the House Minority Leader Todd Rutherford for Russell Ott do you think played in this case?
I don't know. We don't know because we don't know geographically and demographically who came out for Russell, who stayed home. We don't know. We don't know what his African American turnout looks like, what his rural turnout. We don't know. What we know is what we see on the screen so far.
Right.
And let's just see if this holds.
And where you really break this down is you start breaking it down. Keep in mind, Jerry, it's in 3 different counties.
Right.
So you've got a small group of the voters that are in Richland County, a significant vote in Lexington County, and you've got a lot of Calhoun County that are also going to be in this district. That is a place where Russell Ott has served as a House member. His father served as a House member. It is a very rural, very agrarian area. Russell is in that business. He understands it, and he can speak the language. And keep in mind that when you look at the total number of estimated Democrats in that area, it's only 22,000 out of the entire district.
Before we wrap here, would this easily be the biggest upset of the night, you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. The biggest upset will be Harpootlian losing. The other one will be how big the win was against Penry Gustafson. And the Senate sisters, keep in mind, these are the 5 women who voted for the abortion law. That included Mia McLeod and Margie Bright Matthews in that as well. Now, Tamika Isaac Devine is in there. But you could very easily see the 3 Republican women who are in the Senate sisters.
Right.
One of them we know is not coming back, and possibly 2 others.
All right. Dave, Antoine, guys, thank you so much. Darcy, got to send it back to you in the studio.
All right, JR, thank you so much. Another look at a race that a lot of people, especially in the northeast part of Richland County, are keeping their eyes on. This is in the Senate District 222 race, the race between Monica Elkins, a current Richland District 2 trustee. Ivory Thigpen is a representative at the Statehouse now, and Richland County Council Chair Overture Walker. This, with 57% of the precincts reporting at this hour, appears to be another race that's going to go to a runoff. That means in 2 weeks, we'll do all this again. Of course, we're going to continue to follow these numbers for you. We're going to take another break, and we'll see you again tonight on News 19 at 11.